for joining me today. We are mixing it up. As you know, we've been having musicians once a month, and I continue to look forward to continuing to have more musicians on a monthly basis. But also, as I was speaking with several people, including Reverend Connie, we wanted to talk about how we might do something a little different than just lessons that are recorded. And so, this format today is a little bit of Reverend Connie, Oprah style. Now, the question is, I'm not sure if it's you or me that's Oprah, although you're the ones who ask the deep questions. So I think Oprah may be you. But thank you for joining me this morning and being willing, adventurous, open to what we want to do this morning. I'll let you say hello to everybody.
Yes, good morning. And it's really great because as I continuously badger Reverend Kathy with my questions and with my I want to go deeper. I want to go deeper. She's a very smart lady when she says, okay, Connie, how about you do this with me? And so here I am, and I'm looking forward to whatever needs to be said and whatever needs to be heard, because it's just going to be a wonderful conversation with Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you for being willing. And, I know that our lesson today or our chat today is about voting our vision and mission. And I want to say to everybody, I don't usually consider myself much of a political person, but I do understand that I have a voice and a vote, and that makes a difference. And I don't take for granted, and why I'm wearing the red, white, and blue today, I don't take for granted our democracy and the opportunity to be able to practice our faith, which in many other countries or other parts of the world may not be so open, available, and free to do that, and to be therefore expressing today sort of this combination between, well, I have my faith and I'm going to be voting, and how do these things come together? How do you see that context, and how do you see yourself in that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, me. Well, this has been a great challenge for me. And I have been spending a lot of time just kind of weighing back and forth all these different thoughts that go through my head from all is in divine right order. Well, if everything's in divine right order, then do I just maintain peace and allow it to outpicture? How do I fit into divine right order? I go to, in Course in Miracles, we say, of myself, I know nothing. I mean, why would I trust little mind when there's an infinite mind out there that knows what to do? So it's trying to find this balance of really being in what in Course in Miracles we call the borderland, this between being a spiritual being and a human being, and how do we use what we believe in, and how do we use this philosophy in order to manifest that into our world in the correct way? So that's what I've been really pondering lately as we're getting close to the election and just the other things that are going on in our world.
I'm curious, if somebody asked you, are you a political person, what would you say?
You know, I have such strong roots in the 60s with a lot of civil rights demonstrations, and it's kind of like my nature to think that I have to go out and fix it. And that's where I'm running into a problem. In fact, I saw on my utility bill, somebody said this somewhere, and I had to write it down. It says, it's not my job to know what's right for the world. It's my job to listen within to where I'm led.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, am I a political person? I'm a person. I live in a world. I'm trying my best to figure out how to manage it. That's all I can say for now.
Beautiful. I love that you release the label, but state, your history, because that makes That makes a difference. And I love that you have presented in multiple ways. Look, I am open. I'm asking the questions. And of course, Reverend Michael loves to say he's the wander man, which means he's always wondering. And I think that's an important point. In other words, that we know whether many faiths talk about not immediately judging. And I know for my own family that I have family who have differing views, and I don't want to be labeled. Meaning that there are certain topics that I may lean one way and other topics I may be another way. And so I've always sort of resented people in the voting arena wanting to label me and then making a lot of assumptions about what it is that I believe. So I appreciate the fact that you've talked about that openness, and yet, hey, I'm trying to figure out my pathway based on what I believe, how I see myself in the world, and frankly, how you got called here this morning.
Right.
As you spoke to what was passionate and calling to you.
So I have a question for you, since I get to be Oprah. So you say that you're apolitical. So how do you do that? How do you do that?
Well, and some people don't want to hear this, so then it's not really much of a conversation. But I tend to want to. I'm going to use some examples that may not seem pertinent, but I know that I'm going to use later. Jesus walked on water. Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus did a lot of miracles. And I believe Jesus was trying to say to us, you too, brothers and sisters, can do this. And I look at Jesus being a metaphysical figure who mastered, being the spiritual essence in a human body. Now, just because I think that Jesus was inviting us to learn how to, again, walk the talk and live on earth and knowing your spiritual truth, doesn't mean that right now I'm enlightened enough to walk on water and to raise myself from the dead and do the miracles that he did. However, I know I can do miracles as a minister, as I do spiritual mind treatment and reveal the wholeness and the truth for people. So the point is that, I was thinking, especially after you and I had a previous conversation about absolutists. Yes, I believe that we have the power to demonstrate as Jesus demonstrated, but that doesn't mean right now I feel I have the consciousness to just be there. So as I'm speaking with people, I do know, and this is not, if you read up on politics, that I try to stay open. I try to ask questions. And a lot of time people want to get into the, I'll say, earthly stuff of shouting out a lot of different numbers, etc. But I know based on psychology that we are not looking to change our mind. We already have our mind up for a lot of folks, and therefore are looking for evidence. And I can see that in some folks who are on Facebook, in the sense of, for me, I believe in science, I believe in Dr. Fauci, and yet people will find, a spokesperson or an article that opposes, wearing masks or whatever the case may be. And for me, it's like, Dr. Ernest Holmes said, it's a pill or a prayer, it's all God. In other words, the science is God. And hence, for me, having to ask questions allows me to see where they're coming from. And then are they willing and open to hear where I'm coming from, which comes back to who I am as a person and being able to have a conversation. You and I are able to have this conversation right now because we trust each other. We're willing to be open. And those are some things that some folks can't even start there.
Well, maybe the others who are listening to us, they haven't seen this, our voter guide. So should we just maybe mention just a very little bit so they know what it actually is saying?
Beautiful. So the Centers for Spiritual Living has a spiritually motivated social engagement committee that they brought together people from across the Centers of Spiritual Living, and they created a voting guide, meaning they're not going to tell you how to vote. Again, that's not what Science of Mind does. Instead, we're going to talk about, and I want to quote from Dr. Ernest Holmes. This is how the voting guide starts. The world is perhaps at the point of the greatest crisis in all human history. Now, remember, Dr. Ernest Holmes passed away in like 1960. And the greatest crisis in all human history, and there seem to be two attitudes, I would say more than two, we can assume. One is calmness, faith, and conviction. The other would be despair. And despair is unthinkable. Let each in their own way dedicate their time, their service, their hope, and their spiritual conviction to the common sense of liberty and justice for all. And let's work without tiring and pray without ceasing. So what this voting guide does, and I'll be happy to send it out to folks, again, via our directory, it centers ourselves in what are our principles. And Connie, I'm thinking maybe we can talk a little bit about some of those principles that are in here and what they have to say. But, one of the things I'm going to say is the first step is just to be praying. Mm-hmm. Praying for your own being led to what you personally are meant to vote for, to voice based on, again, your personal connection with spirit. I think that's the first step. That's not something that I've always done in the past, but definitely have been doing more of. And I think that's an important place to begin. So that's one thing that I got out of it. What else did you get out of that?
Well, it was interesting because it lists all what our core values are. So, and asking you that when you go to the polling place or before you get there, to be thinking of, does whatever I'm voting for, is it in alignment with what I am standing for? But I think what is more interesting is then it actually goes into giving you some tips on how to get clear. And this one line in here I'll read, because this is the one where I would get tripped up. Be patient and allow the vision to unfold and come into form in spirit's time. In other words, don't try to push this process of doing what your inner voice is telling you to do. Avoid drifting into planning, controlling, or attempting to make things happen. And that's, I think, a real fine point, that you get it, you know what your values are, you get in alignment with those, and then you go within and you let spirit help direct how you're going to move forward with it. But when you have a very strong inner voice that wants to fix things and control things, I just found that was probably the biggest point for me, is to know when what I'm hearing is spirit and not my need to fix things so that I feel better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that means when you say fix things, that you are looking in the outer world and feeling a contrast with your inner world, mm-hmm. which I love. Since you brought up Course in Miracles, of course, we have a science of mind philosophy as the basis. I'll also throw in a little Abraham Hicks here, in the sense of when you feel that contrast, it is awakening, it is allowing you to become aware, and it is allowing you to focus and now place your intention where you feel that gap is. What's missing for me? And now what do I need to focus on? Because I know that love is there. I know that truth is there. I know that integrity is there. And am I focusing on that? So then you get new rockets of desire based on experiencing this contrast.
That's right. And that I think I asked this question of a group, I think it was in the Power of Eight group. And it was really interesting because it was so clear that, when you're listening to spirit's voice, you feel at peace. When my tape is running, which is normally that I want everything out there to show up the way I need it to show up so that I feel okay. Generally, there's a whole lot of anxiety in there. There's a lot of attachment in there. There's a lot of arrogant self-righteousness in there. There's a whole big stew pot of just vibrations that are down there where I don't really want to be. And so it's really paying attention to, how do I feel? When I'm doing this now, I'm going to place this ballot, or I'm going to do this particular social action, what am I feeling inside? Am I feeling peaceful? Am I feeling like I'm not even attached to, is this going to change the world? Is this going to make a difference? It's none of that. It's, does this feel like what I need to be doing right now in this moment that's in alignment with where I am? And that's kind of, after all this chewing on all this stuff, because that need just to go out there, especially when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and just this ferocious need, oh my gosh, I've got to get out there and fix everything, and having to wind all that back in, reel it all back in, because it was definitely coming from fear. It was not coming from love and from peace.
So I love that it calls you back to your faith, right? The when you're feeling the uncomfortableness of all of that, and that we sometimes have to remember, and this comes back to the open-mindedness and being willing to learn from others. I was recently in the university is using the book in common, the How to Be an Anti-Racist. So there are a whole lot of sessions that you can go to, and in talking about that particular, it's definitely being able to remember that we can all learn from each other, even if we have opposing views. But again, that means being open, and that means being comfortable in being centered and standing in your place of faith and love and peace. Because there's no way, and this is what my practice is I can easily be triggered. And the minute I start getting into my emotions, then I'm hitting on that, perhaps, as you said, some anxiety or something that I want it to be my way. And really, we have to surrender our ego, and we have to be listening. The practitioner students are using Mark Nepo's 7,000 Ways to Listen. So how can I listen? How can I learn, rather than thinking that I must come in and with power, I'm going to react to you and think I'm going to change your mind? I'm probably not going to change your mind if I'm coming at you with a lot of energy, which is what we see a lot of today.
Right. And then that reminds me of Mother Teresa, who said she would never be against anything. It's only what she was for. So, I've been really practicing that as conversations start to engage in I've been helping put up some signs. And someone said, well, can't we have a sign that says anti or against? And I was like, no, that feeds all the energy in the wrong way, because whether it's positive or negative energy, it's all energy floating out there in that particular arena. So it's really important that if we're led to a particular path, that it's really something that we're for. And then the universe is right there backing us 100%. And that's, I think that's really important too.
Yeah. And of course, even in Dr. Holmes' Sermon by the Sea, which we have as our theme for the year, he says, find me somebody who's for and not against. And so, it keeps getting repeated. And I think some of that is because I feel like, as a person of faith, that I realize that what seems obvious to one person may not seem obvious to another. In other words, I live an entirely different life, perhaps with an entirely different perspective, based on what it is my soul needs to learn, what I need to see, what I need to know. And hence, life is not black and white. As I said earlier, from the armchair expert, being human is messy because there's a lot of hues, meaning a lot of different perspectives that make up an issue. And if there was anything that I wished, it would be that as a country, we work together for compromise, because it's never going to be 100% one way or the other. It's evolution. It's understanding each other and moving together forward. And I think that there are always ways to do that. And the minute we start sticking our feet in the ground and becoming stubborn, this is when we're going to eventually get ran over by the river, meaning you can't be in a river, which is always constantly changing, the truth of the river, and think that you aren't going to be worn down.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of our core values is, what works for all, that unity. So I have to say, all these years, 40 some years, I have been waiting for something for religious science, for Centers for Spiritual Living to actually say something about all this and to give us an opportunity to at least have this discussion about how do we use the principles that we stand for and bring those out into this experience that as a human being we are all sharing. Um, I've, I'm just really grateful that they've brought it forward, and I hope that others will want to look at it as well, because it's I think it's very well thought out and very useful for us at this time.
And one of the things that the voter guide does is it shares what the Centers for Spiritual Living, as you mentioned, values and principles are. And I think it's really important that people figure that out for themselves. In other words, some people want to start from the surface and start defining their values based on what they're seeing. But again, if you go back into prayer and centering yourself, as we were saying, on what do I stand for? What are my values? What am I passionate about? And then being able to start a discussion or engage in your voting from that place, that is an important place to begin, which means knowing yourself. And the reason why I say that is a lot of us think we know ourselves. Yeah, I know what my favorite food is and my favorite color. That's not the kind of getting to know yourself that meditation brings, that spiritual practice brings. Being able to move into the space where you can sense the wisdom that goes beyond your human beingness requires spiritual practice.
And asking the harder questions, because even after I looked at all these things, they were pretty reasonable, what our values were, and standing together for social justice. Okay, now how does that relate to Black Lives Matter? So, and it's a personal discussion that you have with yourself, but I've been forcing myself to look at things that are really uncomfortable or that they don't easily fit together with what we teach and what we preach and what we actually do. And so trying to really get all those into alignment, I think is really powerful, because then really you're utilizing all of it. You're letting spirit direct it and to illuminate to you. And then you're being the vessel to help bring it into manifestation. And it's rather divine. And then I think we're part of that divine right order. Maybe that's the piece that I'm supposed to play in this universal intelligence's plan, that it needs someone to do this one thing. But it has to be wound back up, reeled back in, that it's coming from truly what spirit is leading you to do, and not from, the ego.
And that's really, really important, because when you get on Facebook and you say Black Lives Matter, watch out, right? Everybody from every which direction. And I'm going to go back to the fact of what I said earlier, is that's really a label for a movement. And you can't label, you can't use a label to describe everybody who's in that movement, meaning people's experience of what that is. We start to containerize it and say, well, this is what this means. And it's really, no, there are just lots, the way I soften the particular edges, because again, people start labeling and defining what this means if you say Black Lives Matter, and that's where the edges just go wild. But instead, bringing myself back into, I do believe that all humans were created equal. So I am coming back to the presence of understanding that and wanting then to create my vision from what I think that means. And I think that's really important, meaning if somebody forces me to use a label, yeah, I'll fall one way or another. But I'm going to say that the labels start to become a false reaction, again, on Facebook or in social media, because people from the superficial level are using that label to mean, then this is your experience, this is what you mean, this is what, and once again, it's like, no, it's more personal than that label.
Yeah. Well, all of a sudden I'm realizing that I'm really enjoying this conversation. And now I'm really scared that it could be 2 p.m. We've just been chatting away, Kathy. So I hope you're minding the time.
I am.
Okay.
I have the time right up on my computer screen. And one of the things I want to do before we start to round it up is, one of the things the voter guide from CSL talks about is making sure that people are really clear that they do have a voice, that we as a center want people to use that voice. So please make sure you're registered. After doing this lesson, again, I'm always loving learning. I realized that there's actually a where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov where I signed up to see the status of my ballot. Now you can see it. They'll send you an email, they'll send you a text, they'll call you and leave a message. And I was like, wow, they're making some changes. No surprise. There's lots of changes, right? We all know that regarding ballots, etc. But I love the fact that they have new tools. I love the fact that, of course, I've always liked the League of Women Voters who upfront say we are covering the issues as nonpartisan, a group of people. I love that they're willing to engage, have a conversation, and then express again in nonpartisan manner how they see each of the issues. And I find that also a better model than perhaps where our politics have gone, and hoping that we can return to, again, being respectful, being open, being willing to learn from each other, and being able to compromise rather than feeling it's my way or your way or no way.
Mm-hmm. You know, I a couple days ago in my email, I'm not sure if it was Uplift or the Shift Network, but one of them, it was just the line on the email, the subject line. And this is what it said: let your being do the doing. And I went, you know, that is so succinct for me. Mm-hmm. Let your being do the doing. And that kind of just gives me the keeps like me grounded, but at the same time in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I hope again that I'm going to draw in all of you who are watching today. I see 39 people are watching. And of course, the minute we post this, then in addition to those 39 people who have experienced us live, there will be usually on average another 30, 40, 50 people who will watch this video recorded, just wanting to let our community know that we have still a very engaged community. And, you know, Reverend Connie, again, just really want to thank you for being courageous and open and willing to try out this new format together. And I look forward to hoping that all of you who are watching join us in the Zoom room so that we can talk a little bit more, go a little bit deeper on the subject and how you liked this format. And again, you know, thank you, Connie, and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Great to be here.
Great.